want to talk about module 2, what we're going to be focusing on this week. Of course, this involves the set and setting for lucid dreaming. So the set is the mindset that we're going to be cultivating in order to recognize the dream state. It has to do with all the techniques we already started with, dream recall, creating that sacred space for sleep, but also we're going to be focusing on our memory training further, specifically prospective memory training, coming up with a plan to implement in the dream state, not just for inducing lucidity or recognizing dream signs, but cultivating those integrative aspects as well. And there's a lot of different parts of this. So we're going to give you a little foundation for that today. This also involves what we call the setting for lucid dreaming, which really the most important part about this is the state of activation of your brain or your central nervous system, the time of night that you're practicing these skills. So I do want to make a few notes on lucid dream induction, because a lot of the techniques out there, they aren't very well integrated. They seem kind of disparate. There's just like so many people. I think this is a Reddit thing. They've started making up their own acronyms to describe different parts of it. And it starts to get kind of like muddy and confusing, in my opinion. So I want to propose to you that there is a better view of induction, and that really a lot of these techniques that are seemingly disparate really do fall under the umbrella of the mnemonic induction of lucid dreaming, or mild. And every single one of them, you know, if you want to ask me about it, I will talk to you about, well, what does this have to do with memory training or prospective memory focuses? So they all fall under this scope. And we can think about mild, or what does it mean to have a mnemonic? This is just a technique that's intended to assist our memory. And in our case, we're trying to remember to do something at a future point in time when we are dreaming, so what we call prospective memory. And the goal here is to give ourselves enough memory training so we can remember our state while we are actually in the dream state. And this involves the entire set and setting, remembering to do things at the appropriate times under the optimal conditions. So this sort of memory training typically is broken down into smaller parts. This is how any skill is usually taught. You take something that's kind of big and you break it down and you learn things step by step, which I think is fine. And very often this is taught from the bottom up. We start with most basic skills like our dream recall, and then we add cumulatively to it. And that's something that we're also doing as well. But I want to make an attempt today to give you a more integrated view of mild, because even so-called experts of lucid dreaming don't describe mild very well. Like, this is a paper from 2018 by Scott Sparrow, Ryan Hurd, and company on galantamine, and they're describing some of the techniques of lucid dreaming. And this is how they describe mild: repeating pre-sleep affirmations, such as the mnemonic induction of lucid dreams, are mild. So you say at bedtime, tonight I'll have lucid dream, over and over. This is not what mild entails, and deviates a lot from the original descriptions, which you can see in my very beat up book of Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming. So I want to give you more of that umbrella view of everything that we're doing. We're training the memory to realize you're dreaming, and not just to suddenly remember, or abruptly have this memory that you're dreaming, or it pops up out of nowhere, but to be able to deconstruct our waking beliefs, no matter whether we're awake or asleep. And this can come in a variety of forms. So this is what we are going to be focusing on today and going forward. And I think it also helps to view mild in terms of a 24-hour practice. When we're trying to learn lucid dreaming, this is something that we weave in, not just during the nighttime, when we're asleep, but also during the daytime. I'm going to come back to this 24-hour practice cycle, probably next week, because we're going to focus a little bit more on the right side from lights out to the end of night when the sun comes up, where we're practicing mild before sleep, possibly if we wake up in the middle of the night and go back to sleep. And then also when we wake up and we do our dream journaling. So we're going to start with some very simple exercises. Next week, we're going to break a little bit more into the wild technique and also how do we integrate some of these tools into our daytime practices. And I really like the metaphor of thinking of mild as like the trunk of a tree. You know, the foundation of lucid dreaming is rooted in memory, and mild is the core practice. But mild, it can also be expanded and extrapolated to include many sub-techniques to help you best focus your mind, much like the branches of a tree. And it's okay to branch off and explore these other areas to see what's going to help you the most. Just remember that no matter what your repertoire of techniques looks like, it comes down to these same principles of memory, perspective memory, and strategies to amplify our memory of whether or not we're dreaming. So again, just all smaller parts of the same tree, whether it's developing our perspective memory for recognizing dream signs, deconstructing those waking belief systems, setting our intentions, and remembering to implement them at the right time later, and using rehearsal strategies, visualization, other techniques applied in the day, close to sleep, right before a REM period, such as during the wild techniques we're going to go through. Okay, so to build on these skills, we're already developing our recall. So one of the most important foundations for lucid dreaming. We are also going to focus on the dream sign part of the module this week. And really, this is about looking for signs that you're dreaming. And these tend to appear in one of three ways. It might be a sign that, or an event that would be impossible in waking life. If you notice something impossible in waking life, well, the answer is easy. You're definitely dreaming. So you want to reconstruct your belief systems to support lucidity when you notice things that are not possible in waking reality. But there's also dream signs that may be possible in waking reality, but they're not necessarily probable. So we'll give you some tools to work with those as well. But we also want to be looking for dream signs that are just reflective of what our dreams tend to be like. They're dream-like in certain ways. And we can have dream-like experiences in waking reality all the time. But if you notice something dream-like, that is an opportunity to practice these mild skills. And we're going to give you some tools to help you with that. You'll notice in the module, this goes through Dr. LaBerge's 4 categories of dream signs. This chart here actually comes from my book, Learn to Lucid Dream. It gives a description of these and some examples. I would love to pause right now and go through some of these and just get the class to describe some dream signs from their own dreams that they think might fit some of these categories. So why don't we go through each row here, and you can just feel free to chime in. You don't even need to raise your hand. If you have an example from one of your own dreams, a dream sign, I want to know what category you think it fits in and why. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. Feel free to go through this lecture. I recommend doing the worksheets, listing your dream signs, describing what categories they are. You know, when you wake from dreams, you know, point out your dream signs and consider what was odd about them or unusual and what category were they. Okay, let's keep going here. So the mnemonic edition of lucid dreaming part of the module, feel free to go through that. I will point out a couple things about this. And, you know, the one thing I've been trying to highlight from before is that mild is all encompassing. This is all about training our memory to recognize the dream state. However, there are some mnemonics within mnemonics. You know, one of them, which I present often, is the 3 R's of mild, where we script our dreams as if we became lucid, we rehearse and visualize them, and then we remind ourselves that next time we're dreaming, we're going to recognize the dream state. So you'll see the instructions in the module, and one thing to point out about the rescripting part is that there are a couple of different layers, and one of them is more focused on the induction component. So this first part, you choose a point, choose a dream sign, and actually write out what were the steps, how did your thinking change in order to get to the conclusion that you were asleep. And a lot of time people practice this and they kind of skip these steps. They just say, oh, I encountered a dream sign and suddenly remembered I was dreaming. Well, good. Lucid dreams do happen that way sometimes, but other times it's much more nuanced. You recognize there's something unusual or odd, or you try to come up with explanations for it. So actually take those thoughts and try to extend them into actually recognizing your dreaming. So really try to spell that out for yourself. And also there is an induction component that applies here regarding prolonging techniques, because once we induce lucidity, it's so easy to forget we're dreaming right away. So we want to implement other methods to help maintain that induction of lucidity. And I'll point out where that is in the module in a few minutes. But after you become lucid and figure out how to maintain your lucidity, there's also an integration component. How do you incorporate the goals that you had? How do you integrate adaptive responses to whatever the dream is already presenting? And this could look like controlling or trying to change the dream, but not necessarily, such as in Gorgeous Dream, which took more of a witnessing perspective, and still noticing and processing what was happening, but not necessarily trying to change anything. So you want to actually finish the rescripted version of your dream so that it incorporates both components. It's the induction and the integrative components as well. And of course, after that, you rehearse, visualize the dream in your imagination. And then lastly, you want to remind yourself that you're going to recognize your dreaming in your next dream. You can use a mantra, tell yourself, tonight I'll remember I'm dreaming. You could think of all the different dream signs that might present themselves to you and just really make that affirmation. So we're actually going to be focusing on mild over the night this week. Now remember, there's a very structured way to do mild, an intensive way to do mild, but there's also a very relaxed way, or what some people call like the lazy way. I don't like that word necessarily, but you should be able to balance what works within your schedule, with what resources you have. So you don't necessarily have to apply mild intensively over the night across the entire night. Like when I go to retreats with Dr. LaBerge, he likes to collect data some nights, right? And very often he wants us to collect data in the beginning part of the night, anytime you wake up. And he's probably right. And why else are we all there? But it's tiring. And so I'll argue with him and I'll say, well, what about just the last part of the night? After our wake back to bed period, our sleep interruption, can we do mild at those times? And of course, that's fine. You can adapt this practice however it fits in your life. And so you can kind of see, we have more non-REM in the beginning of the night. Honestly, I encourage people to just not really think too much about lucid dreaming. Let your mind sleep. This is where you're getting the deepest, most restorative stages of sleep. And if you're not getting lucid in the REM rich parts of the night, you're going to have trouble being lucid in the earlier parts of the night. And those are shorter dreams as well. And also non-REM sleep is quite difficult to be lucid in. And I know some people have an interest in that, and it overlaps with some of the Tibetan dream yoga practices, but not necessarily the first place to start, although you could certainly explore it if you like. State testing, very often state testing, reality testing, whatever you want to call it, is the first thing that people apply or think of when they consider what are the techniques to induce lucid dreaming. And it has some utility, I would say, but it isn't useful, and it actually can impair your ability to get lucid. You might already know you're dreaming or wonder if you're dreaming, and then you think you have to do a state test and then it doesn't work, or maybe it does, but you get confused and it just interferes with lucidity. So state testing shouldn't necessarily be your go-to when it comes to lucid dreaming. It really should be done as part of an integrated protocol with mild. So that means you practice, could be in the daytime, could be at night, but the first step of state testing or checking what state you're in is looking for dream signs. What dream signs are already available? So if you're dreaming, there will be dream signs, no doubt about it. There, in most cases, there's going to be something in the dream that says that you're dreaming. Sometimes people come to me and say, well, sometimes I just can't tell, if I'm dreaming, or there aren't any dream signs. And I ask them to describe the dream, and there's so many dream signs. So focus on that part first. Now, let's say you didn't notice any dream signs, maybe because you're awake, actually. This is where you can actually confirm whether or not you're asleep with a test that we know or think works pretty reliably. And this is the rereading state test. So very easy to do. Find some printed text, read it, look away, read it again. Did it change? If it didn't change, then you're probably awake, but you might not be. So the next step is to do it again. Look away, reread it again, but this time when you reread it, imagine that the text changed. Visualize it changed, expect it to change, and see if it changed. And for the majority of these attempts, for most people, the text does change. So it's a very reliable test, much more reliable than a lot of other strategies out there we think, although there might be some others that are pretty good, but this one works really well. So make this rereading test your go-to. And if you're applying this in the waking state, the text isn't going to change if it's printed text, right? So at that point, what you're supposed to do is not just go about your day, apply the 3 R's of mild. Think to yourself, well, what would it be like if I was dreaming? What kind of dream signs would be present? What would I do? And then visualize that, even just for a brief moment in your mind. And before moving on, just set that simple reminder, okay, next time I have a moment like this and I'm questioning my state, I'm going to practice this test. I'm going to look for dream signs, and I'm going to realize I'm dreaming. Okay. Yeah, and good to think of this as a fail-safe, right? Because if there's dream signs and you're doing this in a dream, you don't even need to do a reality test. You already know you're dreaming, so trust your lucidity. But in the waking state, there aren't going to be dream signs, and it's so easy for people to do a test and just sort of move on from it. But you're training yourself, if you do that, to not really deconstruct your belief systems. This test, you apply it in the state, it really helps you confirm, yes, I am definitely awake. And so really just use it as a fail-safe. Only apply this if you believe you've already ruled out dream signs and you believe that you're awake. And then, of course, lastly, we have prolonging lucid dreaming techniques. Feel free to check this out. Of course, lucidity is difficult to maintain. It's very easy to immediately forget that you're dreaming or to wake up. So regarding these prolonging techniques, incorporate these into the mild techniques. So if you're rescripting techniques, incorporate it by imagining yourself not just getting lucid, but doing the hand rubbing, trying the spinning, reminding yourself over and over that you're dreaming. Actually write that out into your rescripted version.